Get started with our event this evening. Thank you all for coming out to our third annual Landlord Education Series here in the Hilltop community here at Glenwood Community Center. My name is Curtis Brown, and I serve as a neighborhood program specialist in our Department of Neighborhoods, overseeing portions of the Comprehensive Neighborhood Safety Strategy. We're excited to be with you this evening, as I said, here at Glenwood, and we have a fantastic panel here tonight as we discuss topics regarding safety and how landlords and residents can get involved with us and we can make change happen in our neighborhoods. Just to give you a little bit of background, we started this 3 years ago, actually from a neighborhood safety committee meeting that we had right here in the Hilltop. We received feedback from residents who said they felt as though landlords in their neighborhoods wanted to be good stewards in their neighborhoods, but necessarily did not have the resources or did not know where to go to get information to become better. So we took that information and brought it back, and this is what we came up with 3 years ago. And every year has been a success, and as I said, we are happy that, to continue this Landlord Education Series this year, and we're excited to have you with us this evening. As I said, we have had 2 nights previous to this night. Our first night, every night we've had a different topic, but tonight's theme is safe and secure. And our panelists feature city representatives from our city departments whose focus is around safety. And we also have a special guest this evening, our new director of our public safety department, Robert Clark, who you will hear from later this evening. We are being streamed virtually tonight on our city YouTube channel as well as our Department of Neighborhoods Facebook page. Those of you who are viewing us virtually, thank you for joining us this evening. If you have questions that you would like to ask either our panelists this evening or anyone else who is involved in the program, please feel free to submit your questions in the chat feature either on YouTube or Facebook. For those of you who are here with us in person, we do have a microphone set up on this side of the room. If you happen to have questions throughout tonight's presentation, please feel free at any time to step up to the microphone and we will acknowledge you to ask your question. And now let's get started. First, what we're going to do is go to our panelists and have them introduce themselves, stating their name, what department they're from, what program they oversee, and any other additional information that they would like to share with us. And we'll start on this side with Officer Christopher Reilly.
Thank you very much. I am Officer Reilly, so I am the nuisance abatement officer who works closely with the city attorney, Zach Klein's office, and all of the zone attorneys and other investigators, currently looking at problem apartments, houses, and commercial properties that don't have liquor permits. That's where I am currently, and I've been a police officer with the Division of Police for just about 27 years, and 23 of those years I was assigned as a community liaison officer with the other 19 officers, that one police officer that's assigned to each police precinct. So, thank you.
Great, we're happy to have you.
Good afternoon, evening, a little bit of both. My name is Emerald Hernandez. I am an assistant director with your Department of Neighborhoods. My areas of focus include the Comprehensive Neighborhood Safety Strategy, and I am also the city's homeless advocacy liaison. So the Comprehensive Neighborhood Safety Strategy, which Curtis mentioned earlier, came out of 2017, when at the time the city hit its highest rate of homicides, our highest number. Any homicide, one homicide is just too many. That year we had 143. So the Comprehensive Neighborhood Safety Strategy began. And that was in partnership with multiple city agencies and multiple city programs, obviously CPD, all leaning in a comprehensive way to wrap around neighborhoods where we saw high levels of violence and homicides. It began to work. In 2018, we saw 108 homicides. In 2019, we saw 104. And then, much like the rest of the planet, COVID hit. And we saw spikes in violence across this country, across the planet. A lot of frustration, a lot of trauma is going on. So we pivoted, just like every other city and just like every other department. Today, we are focused on programming, focusing on youth and focusing on families, and really helping them work through what is happening at home, whether it's access to internet so they can continue to go to school, encouraging families and connecting families to services and resources they might need, and really helping our youth, which is something we've been discussing more and more, on how to process what's happening. As adults, we get frustrated. As adults, we want this to go away. But if you add in that youth and that frustration, it's going to be something very different and something we have to look at as a city. So that is the work I'm doing on behalf of the Comprehensive Neighborhood Safety Strategy currently.
Thank you, Emerald.
Good evening. My name is Lori Francescan. I'm the Community Relations Coordinator at Columbus Public Health, while also serving as the Program Manager for the Group Violence Intervention Strategy here in Columbus. The Group Violence Intervention Strategy is a focused deterrence model targeting group violence in our city. And as we engage through the rest of the evening, I'll be answering some other questions specific to the strategy and its application in our city. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Lori. So as you hear, we have some great panelists with us this evening who are experts in their areas. And again, I welcome those of you viewing us virtually and those of you here with us in person to please take this opportunity to ask questions. And with that, we'll get started with the panel discussion. So Lori, my first question is for you. You mentioned that you are with the Department of Health overseeing GVI. Could you explain exactly what GVI is?
Thank you. GVI, Group Violence Intervention, is a focused deterrence model targeting group violence in cities. It is also a community-based collaborative approach, incorporating these entities of law enforcement, community moral voice, and social services and outreach. And it's a collective effort to address the group violence in our city. It is modeled after the research from David Kennedy at the John Jay College and the National Network for Safer Communities.
All right, great, thank you. Emerald, kind of along the same lines, you kind of talked about the Comprehensive Neighborhood Safety Strategy, but could you kind of talk about a little bit more of the more so nooks and crannies of it? Could you kind of talk about what all encompasses the Neighborhood Safety Strategy?
Sure. So the Comprehensive Neighborhood Safety Strategy, excuse me, is a combination of about 9 different departments, including different bits and pieces. So my favorite bit, even though I'm not part of that bit, is our CARE Coalition. I just call them an army of just angels and do-gooders who reach out to families in the wake of violent crimes, in the wake of homicides, and really touch base with their next of kin, their parents, whoever it might be, and offer them support in that moment. None of us want to experience that moment. None of us can imagine that moment, but for those parents going through it, a lot of times they just need someone who is a neutral voice saying, hi, what can we do? How can we be helpful? Is there any support you can need? Is there anything we can do? And then during that conversation, it's critical that we also talk about what's happening with any kind of brothers or sisters or others in the family. We see a lot of retaliation right now. It's what we see with group violence, which the word group is now kind of in place of the word gang because of kind of how people are kind of disorganized in an organized way. So it's a lot of touching base with the family. I adore the CARE Coalition. I think they're the best thing kind of ever. I don't know what to say about them. We have a gang intervention group that operates out of our Rec and Parks department. So they're here on site working with youth to make sure they're staying on the right track. And if maybe they're going down the wrong one, they're redirected to say, hey, let's pick a positive path and let's find a path that can keep you going in a positive way. Our work at the Department of Neighborhoods began as infrastructure investment. So when there is an event or an incident, we're going to go out and look at that part of the neighborhood, right? What is happening in that neighborhood that this occurred? And what we traditionally see is that neighborhood looks distinctly different than areas where we don't see homicides. It's a little bit of your broken window theory, right? If you see things that don't look kept up, if you see things that might be in disarray, it might look like you can get away with crime. It might look like it's inviting to do things you shouldn't. So we've been working, pretty hard about creating new pathways, and that's not always easy in government to create new pathways, to make investments in lighting, in sidewalks, and other areas that can really help bring a neighborhood a new facelift, and that's part of where this came from, right? Working with residents on what do you see in your neighborhood? What do you see in your neighborhood that makes you feel unsafe? And part of what came up is vacant abandoned houses, houses that are consistently, the properties are in disarray, cars that are on blocks or cars that are parked in yards. All of these things kind of give space for an assumption that one can do something wrong and nothing will happen, right? Or they won't be caught. So that is pretty much where we're doing. That was the design. And today, again, due to COVID, we're pivoting more towards engaging youth and young adults in positive ways and empowering ways.
Great information. And as you kind of mentioned that the safety strategy, started as infrastructure investments, but has really kind of taken a turn to do more programming with youth and for families. So that's excellent information that I think is important for our residents and especially our landlords to know, as we have programs not only for you and possibly your staff, but also for your tenants who are residents in our neighborhoods. Thanks. Officer Reilly, a question for you kind of along the same lines. We talked about CEPTED, which is crime prevention through environmental design. Could you kind of explain what that program is and kind of the nooks and crannies of it?
Sure, absolutely. So CEPTED is just really a method, an organized way to take a look at a problem and from the get-go design out opportunities for criminal activity. So our community liaison officers uses CEPTED methods to go out and do business and home residential security surveys, for example. And we also use the somewhat of a holistic method with the city attorney's office when we look at problem properties that need to be abated. So, for example, if an apartment in the city or apartment complex has been found to be a haven for criminal activity, or we have folks in there just doing, hanging out, doing things that they shouldn't be doing in areas they shouldn't be doing it, the city attorney will reach out to them and ask them if they would like some assistance from the Division of Police or from us to go in and do an inventory or audit, if you will, of the property. So the ideas of natural access control, which basically just sort of controlling movement, the idea of ownership of a particular area, whether it's public or private. These are ideas that we can build in and design in either architecturally or go back and retrofit. I mean, also just by looking at natural surveillance techniques on whether or not tree limbs are too long or too low that prohibit people from inside of buildings to look out and see parking lots or playgrounds or just open spaces that aren't open. So it's that organized effort, pen to paper, looking at it and designing in a way with other people. And this is great to see folks coming out to the rec center tonight and online and taking an opportunity to work with, the resources that they have and that they pay for, and that we're available to them to look at a specific area and said, hey, maybe these are some improvements we need to make, whether that could be, again, limbing up landscaping or adding security technology.
And now you talked about, trimming back shrubs and, adding different things. When we talk about environmental design, does that also include lighting and fencing perhaps and things of that nature? It's not necessarily just, nature things, shrubs and things like that. It could be things that could physically be put in. Is that correct?
Exactly. It's any type of effort that addresses criminal activity. So you don't, if you decide that you think, well, hey, we're having a problem in this parking lot, but we're not sure what time or we can't see the parking lot, and they're considering adding surveillance cameras. We would go out and say, hey, maybe you need one here at the entrance, or maybe you need one over here on this building. We can take a look at that. Or if, oftentimes when I go to these meetings in different parts of the city and dealing with as a liaison, I've found out that sometimes fencing makes great neighbors. So, adding some barriers to keeping people out of certain areas and defining where ownership begins and ends. So, you know, there are costs to all these, of course, but doesn't necessarily mean it has to be an expensive cost. But again, we're looking at when you deal with SEPTED discipline and principles, you're specifically looking at what can be improved.
And kind of a last follow-up to that, you know, with the title, I think the two main words in that title are crime prevention. So making sure that, you know, for example, as he spoke about overgrown shrubs, you know, things, people can hide in them, things can be thrown in them. If they're cut down, then that will prevent that activity from happening.
And you're right, crime prevention, but also promote the idea of positive users coming into a space and filling that void so, you know, bad things aren't happening. So do we take care of a space so nice as to be inviting to other people to come in and use it and collaborate and talk and get out of their house that has the nice air conditioning in, because we don't sit on the front porches anymore, and come in and just have dialogue with each other. That is the kind of thing when we talk about these improvements and promoting community.
Great. Excellent. Thank you for that information again. Those of you in person, please feel free to ask questions. We have a microphone up here that you can simply just step to and we'll acknowledge you. Also, those of you viewing us virtually online, please feel free to put your questions in the chat features on Facebook and on YouTube. And looks like we have a question from a resident here.
Hi, my name's Kurt Dagaford. My wife and I are pretty much landlords in the Linden area. And, you know, we've seen an upsurge in crime, and because the kids weren't in school last year and stuff like that. Prior to the whole pandemic, there was, what I was aware of, one camera in the Linden area that was at Hudson and McGuffey, and it was a City of Columbus camera. And I think it shined both ways, up and down Hudson and down McGuffey. And I actually was going to try to talk to some residents and see, hey, what would you be opposed to more cameras in the neighborhood or for it? And I guess my question to you guys is you know, I'm a contractor that worked in Upper Arlington. Every corner in Upper Arlington has a camera pointing every different way. I mean, there's cameras over. But if you look at Linden, the City of Columbus doesn't. They have one. They had one. I don't know if there are more or not. But is that part of your technology strategy, is to try to get cameras up to help with security in these neighborhoods and having the manpower to be able to use it, you know, to be able to help out? Because, you know, I mean, from speeding cars or a gunshot over here and the car takes off, and maybe they could use a grid of cameras in these neighborhoods to help. Thank you.
And thank you for your question. I don't know who that was.
Well, thanks, Kurt, so much. I'll just say what I have to say, and then we can pass it down. The cameras along like Hudson and McGuffey, Cleveland and Hudson, the city crime cameras, I think that they have proven their value. And you know, when something happens, you can never have enough of them, and they're never in the most perfect place. So I know that they work and they complement other technology like ShotSpotter, for example. So if a ShotSpotter alert goes off and the officers track that or go to it, can that work in tandem with the city's crime cameras? And I would think that the answer would be yes. Under perfect situation, we would have officers that would be able to track the cameras, connect with ShotSpotter, things like that. And when you're talking the idea of expanding the program, a lot of people are very happy with that, but you know, city crime cameras cost a lot because, unlike a Ring doorbell, there's a lot of infrastructure that goes along with the crime cameras. And I'll let probably somebody better suited from the Department of Public Safety to talk about whether or not it'll be expanded or not. But we're also very sensitive to people's concerns about their privacy also. So, you know, we have to think all that together, but there definitely is a value, and we have had a lot of positive remarks about that, and I'll pass it down to.
So future investments include the real-time crime data center. It's a long name, but that's what it is. That's going to be coming online on Sullivan Avenue right here in the Hilltop. So that's going to be something that is something we are very excited about. That's when we can actually get to actually watching what's happening across the city in real time, right? That hence in the name. Often what we have to do now, since we don't have this, is we'll look at data, we'll look at where we're seeing incidences, and then we have to make decisions moving forward. So that also then it has to create a situation where the crime has already happened, right? And we can try and project based on previous experience, but that real crime data center, real-time data center, oof, that's a name, is going to be a great tool to have. And in addition, as you get the Ring and kind of all of those, I know with the Ring specifically, you can sign up and get a certain app, and then your video feed goes straight to law enforcement. We do have one of those MOUs here in the city. So if you have properties and you want those on there, there are ways for your videos to go straight to law enforcement, and that way it's not a matter of getting it to them. They'll already have access to it, but I forget the name of the app, but there is an app that you can get for your Ring doorbells, and it goes straight through. We do have that MOU.
One thing I was thinking, I know we have our area commission and stuff like that, but to talk to them to see if the will of the people in Linden opposed to or in favor of additional security. I mean, certain people will be like, oh, this is my, the government can't videotape me, and other people are so fed up with crime in the Linden area that they want to give the tools that the police, as many tools that the police can use to be able to help out with the crime. So, that's just my final comment. All right.
Start first with you're either your community association or B, the commission for North Linden, and gauge interest there. So the squeaky wheel when it comes to government bureaucracy gets the grease. And if that's something that you have an interest in, then yes, go up there and start with Paula Burleson or whoever's in charge of the North Linden Area Commission now, and tell them that you're interested in it. And we would like to hear that feedback too. But again, we have to balance everything with of the interest of all the city residents.
Delina Scales is your guys' area commission or area liaison. So on the table back there is a hot card. Give Delina a call. She's one of our best. She will call you back. Yep. Yes.
Just once, I wanted to check. Lori, did you have anything you wanted to add before we moved on? Okay. All right, we have another question.
So my name is Takesha Landry, and I also reside in Linden. And I wanted to know, what would you advise a citizen to do that has filed numerous complaints with Internal Affairs and filed police reports with Columbus Police Department, and nothing has taken place? There has been no follow-up. There has been no investigation. And I was also told by Internal Affairs that if I don't like the way Columbus Police are conducting their work or their whatever it is that they do, their protection, whatever, to obtain an attorney. I was also told this by Bob Stewart, who is the public director of public safety. So I have been wanting to get in contact with the mayor, who I have filled out reports and complaints with their office as well, haven't been followed up with. And then I would also like to speak to the chief of police, Elaine Bryant. So what would you advise a citizen to do? Because at this point, I am being extremely targeted by civilians in my community, by my neighbors, and then also by Columbus Police. I have proof, I have photos, I have videos, I have plenty of documentation. I have called just about every resource that I could call to get assistance. Meanwhile, the more I expose Columbus Police and civilians in my community, I'm being retaliated against even more so. I just had to call police last night, actually 4 a.m. this morning, because there was a vehicle sitting outside my house, surveillance in my house. And those that are targeting me are very aware of the fact that I have been exposing them. So the more I expose them, the more they target me. So at this point, I'm concerned about my safety, I have a 17-year-old son, and I have a disabled brother that I have to take care of. And I am reaching out to community resources who aren't doing anything. I've contacted my liaison, who referred me to a Columbus police officer. I provided him with plenty of information and have not been followed up with, and nothing has been resolved. So I'm asking, what would you do, or what would you advise a citizen to do in my situation?
Well, I think, first of all, understand my lane, and my lane as a nuisance abatement officer does not really cross with internal affairs. However, people know that we want to be very transparent with the activities with our officers, and always have that option to contact, whether it's internal affairs, whether it's your elected official. I mean, we got to be open for you to have contact with someone. So making sure that I don't say anything that would conflict with policy procedures, there is a process. I have to respect that process, the residents have to respect that process, but the important thing is that we get you engaged into the process. So I'd like to talk to you one-on-one, sidebar, and I'll get your name, your telephone number, and you will have my name, you will have my phone number, and we'll get you down the road you need to go.
So, because I've resided in Columbus since March of 2020, and things have escalated. I mean, I have been robbed at gunpoint February 6th of 2021 after releasing video footage or video information regarding on social media how I've been targeted by Columbus police and civilians. So that was retaliation, it wasn't random. And so the detective that was assigned to the case have not did anything. He waited till a month later to even follow up on the leads, and then stated or put it in the system that he had no leads and the video footage had been deleted.
And I think
Part of this community dialogue here tonight, when dealing with safety strategies, I will ensure that when we meet and then I get your name and your number and your concern, I will ensure that I will send that up to the chief of police. Yes, ma'am.
question. All right. Again, please feel free to ask questions if you're viewing us virtually via the chat feature. With that, we'll move on. Lori, we'll go back to you. As you talked about, the program that you're overseeing is group violence intervention. Could you kind of discuss exactly what groups are?
Yeah, definitely. So the term group refers to any social network whose members commit violence together. This can include anything from chapters of organized national gangs with recognized symbols, perhaps the Gangster Disciples, to loose neighborhood crews or family networks with no hierarchy or business. It's such as a set that claims a particular block. All gangs, sets, crews, blocks, and other associations are names for groups. And for purposes of the group violence intervention, we are focused on those at highest risk, those group members who are at highest risk to commit gun violence and or group violence, and those to be victims, likely to be victims of group violence.
Excellent. Moving to Emerald, as you talked about the different parts of the comprehensive neighborhood safety strategy and how the strategy touches so many of our city departments. Could you kind of talk about, or if you could inform us, if there are ways for residents and landlords to get involved in the safety strategy?
Absolutely. Thank you for teeing up that question. We have ongoing, I'm super excited, this is where rubber meets the road kind of thing. So we have ongoing safety meetings in, let's see, Linden, the Hilltop, here in the Hilltop, the South Side, Milo, Grogan, Driving Park. And if you would like us to come out and do safety meetings in your neighborhoods, by all means, give us a call. We set them up quarterly. This isn't to take the place of block watches. Block watches are, and we have to be very clear about that, because block watches are really neighborhood driven. What we want to do with the neighborhood safety meeting is talk to you again about what you're seeing in your neighborhood and how can we address that and give it a larger voice inside the city, right? We want to be your advocates. So if you want to, discuss cameras and what can we do electronically and what can we do next technology, right? That's a great discussion to have in our safety meeting. And I can say moving forward, Linden is the first neighborhood that's going to be getting smart lighting. So that's where we can increase and decrease the lumens based on what's going on, right? It's going to have smart nodes on it that's going to capture some additional data. There's, again, always have to balance privacy versus, public realm and all of that. That's always very tricky. But that is something moving forward. Our Department of Utilities has been working on that for quite some time now. So we made our investment, and there are continuing investments going into smart lighting. But that is where we have those discussions, is in those safety meetings moving forward. And then we also have youth safety meetings, and those feel inherently different. When you ask a youth what makes them feel safe and what makes them feel unsafe, it is drastically different than when we ask adults. I know the Franklin County also has a youth advisory committee, and so we engage with them when we can, as well as the Urban League and some other high schools here in the city, about really having that conversation, right? As we're staring at what we were seeing as youth, we're not in schools. I remember being a youth, and if I had time on my hands, I probably did something I shouldn't. So I was pushed into sports, and that was very easy to do in a small town, but here it's a little harder. So that would be what I advise. Feel free to get a hold of me or Curtis. We'll make sure you get the invites to the meetings, and that's the biggest thing I could advise, right? Let us be your voice internally within the city, and we can work from there.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing that, Emerald. And in the past, we have had safety meetings that we have really gotten some great information from residents. And as I mentioned earlier in my introduction, that this Landlord Education Series came from having conversations with residents through those neighborhood safety committee meetings. So if you would like more information, please feel free to reach out to myself or Emerald, or call 311, and we can definitely get that information to you. Going to Officer Reilly, kind of staying under the same umbrella of residents and participation, what are some ways that, or if you could tell me who can participate in the CEPTED program?
Well, I think just about anybody can. It's probably geared more towards owners of private property, so whether that be a home or apartment complex, a business. And I say owners because owners are usually the ones that are making the investment, the capital dollars that go for infrastructure improvements and lighting and technology, but it doesn't have to be. Anybody can be engaged into the planning and the dialogue of improving your spaces. Maybe the space is a park. Maybe the space is your house of worship. Maybe your space is just the school. I don't know, but anybody, and it's actually welcomed to whoever the users are to be engaged in the process. So if you look at it in terms of coming up with developing a plan, yes, anybody can do it. Any resident, I mean, even youth. We would encourage youth that if they're using the high school, one of the things that would would perplex me sometimes when they had asked me to come in and work with the school safety department, and I said, well, do you have any youth that are here also giving their advice? They're the users all day long, along with the teachers and the staff, and they can give you some very valuable insight. But so look at everybody, but understand that generally the costs covering the improvements are owners. So at the end of the day, we want to make sure everybody comes together, because it's a plan that everybody can get and work together with.
Excellent information. So those of you that are interested, it's not out of the ordinary to, if you have a block watch group of residents that are on your block, and if you want to organize the CEPTED program for your block watch to where everyone on your block takes part in the CEPTED program, you can do that, and it would be an excellent thing.
Dealing with the Landlord Education Series, specifically, if there is a landlord out there that say, hey, we're just not really sure on how we can improve things to reduce crime or reduce opportunities to crime, please reach out to us. We would rather hit it head on early before the problems make it downtown.
Exactly. Thank you. Lori, going back to you in the group violence intervention, could you kind of talk about the goals of the program?
Absolutely, thank you. First and foremost, the group violence intervention, the primary goal is to first do no harm. It's a violence reduction model, right? And so that's important as we engage with the community and bring partners together, that goal is kept in mind, no harm. Secondarily, strengthening the community's capacity to prevent violence, which means giving a voice to those mostly impacted by urban violence and meaningfully including them in the decision-making process for addressing it. In addition to that, it's strengthening legitimacy across all partners, and that's law enforcement, the community moral voice, and the social services. It's important that everyone is coming together and recognizes the value that each brings to the table. Lastly, getting the deterrence right and using enforcement strategically. What we know to be true is that 0.5% of our population is driving the serious violence in our city. And so focusing on those group members who are driving that violence and then using that enforcement strategically to address those individuals versus an area of town. And we'll use Linden as an example. Linden is not violent. There are individuals or groups in Linden that are driving the violence in Linden. And so I think it's a real important distinction to make. Columbus is a beautiful city. There are many very vibrant communities and generational families living in those communities. And when we say Linden is violent, we are undermining the value of that community. There are groups in Linden that are driving that violence, and you use the law enforcement strategically and targeting those groups versus the overall community.
Excellent. Great information, Lori. And when you talk about it's the, you spoke earlier about specifically what groups are. Would you say that groups are not necessarily in one neighborhood, but they're in several neighborhoods, and they even sometimes can cross different neighborhoods and have violence not in this neighborhood, but other neighborhoods? Could you kind of talk about just how groups are kind of formed in neighborhoods?
Yeah, it's interesting when we think about, at least from my generation, we think about gangs, right? And we were thinking about the Bloods and the Crips and, the Latin Kings and those types of things. And today, it's groups. It's 2, 3, 5 individuals that are coming together to commit violence together. Those 5 may be a group today, and tomorrow they're hooking up with 2 or 3, 4, 5 of other individuals in various areas of the city. Certainly those areas that we're talking about today that need some additional assistance and attention, those areas sometimes help to lend towards some of that violence. I saw a quote earlier today that, just physical disorder, litter, graffiti, overgrown weeds, inoperable cars, the things that Emerald was talking about earlier, makes a block 25 times more likely to be a chronic crime spot. And so these groups look for those types of areas in which to commit their violence. I do think it's important to note that they vacillate in and out. They're not always with their same group of individuals. And the other side of it, that's why it's really important as we implement this strategy that we pull on peers and mentors and community-based programs to provide the wraparound services and the support to these individuals that are committing these crimes.
Great, thanks for that. Again, I would like to encourage you to ask questions here in person and on our virtual platforms as we begin to kind of start to wrap up our panel discussion. We have a couple more questions, but as we begin to wrap up, please, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. And we'll go to this resident here who has a question.
Hi. Whoops, let me stand back a little. Michelle Dranchek, my husband Kurt. Not sure who to address it to. You were talking about like abandoned cars up on blocks and front yards. There is a particular street that I think is having an issue, and a particular property that when I drove down it, I was shocked. I thought it looked like a war zone. Somebody had set a house on fire and set cars on fire, and they've been sitting burned up in the front yard, and now it's like attracting more trash. I was wondering, because I know that the court system is slow, and I'm sure they have to reach out to the owner, etc. But at some point, is that like a health issue? Because it was my understanding the health department can act more quickly.
So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay. So have you put in some 311 tickets? Have you called 311?
I have not. I know a bunch of people on the street have. It's
Okay.
now been about 2 months, I think, since
Okay.
the fire occurred.
Okay, so I'm going to follow up with you after that. Yes, things should be happening, right? It should be boarded up. The cars do have to be removed at some point. There are code violations that can be followed up with that don't take as long, right? And as we walk through the code process, that's where you start getting layers and layers, and it comes down to, you know, is the property owner trying to comply? Based on what you're telling me, it seems like it's still in quite a disarray. So now I'm wondering, you know, where it is in the code process. And that's also stuff that Curtis and I can help out with, because we can go and ping code at the city attorney's office and say, hey, what's happening with 123 Main Street, right? Throwing out that address. I don't know anything about 123 Main Street. I always use it as my always sample address, but like some people kind of pull back. And so, yeah, let's talk after this so I get that address from you, and we'll follow up for you.
All right, thanks.
Here it is.
And we have one other short question from a resident.
So I just want to respond to what was just said as far as a distinction with civilians and the Linden community. So what I have observed is that the interactions that I have had with civilians and neighbors in Linden, these individuals appear to be working citizens that you would not think that would be involved in such issues that I've been experiencing from individuals in Linden community. So my issue is I can't leave my home without being pretty much what I just recently came across is the term of what is called is gang stalked by individuals whom I do not know. Few of their faces I do remember because they have stalked me more than once. I have had, when I left my home, Columbus police turn on their sirens. It's a repeated pattern of that. They have did it the entire year that I have resided where I reside at, and once they turn on their sirens, based on what I've observed, various individuals in my community and my neighbors will come out their house just to coordinate my location to target me and stalk me any and everywhere I go in Columbus. I have had individuals commit road rage tactics, traffic violation tactics, individuals on the road tailgating me, bright lighting me, cutting me off, speeding behind me, in front of me, just to get in front of me, just to escort me from point A to point B. I have had individuals intentionally try to cause accidents against me in my vehicle and with my 17-year-old who just recently got his permit while driving. Someone actually ran into my vehicle and left the scene of the crime when my son was driving. So it's the individuals that are targeting me, I can't say that they're in a gang because they don't look like they're in a gang. But these individuals, like I said, some of them I have seen before, I do recognize their face, and then a lot of them that I don't. And then while I'm in the midst of being targeted, while I'm traveling from point A to point B, because Columbus police and these civilians and my neighbors in my community are very well aware of the fact that I have been exposing them, and they're going above and beyond to try to keep me silent. They are targeting me to a point to where it's creating a lot of mental distress in every aspect of my life is being sabotaged and targeted due to targeting, intimidation, illegal monitoring. I have had emails constantly hacked into, passwords changed. I'm having a lot of issues with my phone. I have been to Columbus public libraries to access the internet and have had my emails locked out while I'm in a public facility trying to access my internet. So, like I said,
I'm sorry, I don't want to cut you off, but I just want to be sure, because I think what would serve you better is if you had a one-on-one with Officer Reilly, because he could be able to give you some.
Like I said, nothing has come of it, nothing has been resolved. The information that I provided has just been used against me to their benefit to improve their tactics of targeting.
Right. But I think, especially for the forum for this evening, I think what might serve better is if you had a one-on-one, and he's happy to have the conversation with you. And also, I think this is a good segue to go back into the talking about the comprehensive neighborhood safety strategy and having the neighborhood safety committees that we have, where residents can attend those meetings and can have their can voice their concerns about safety issues in their neighborhoods. So even I would be happy to touch base with you afterwards as well. I think we've spoken before. So I think if we met with Officer Reilly and I after this, we would be more than happy to have a discussion with you. And I think we would be able to have a more one-on-one candid conversation to where we can be able to help you with that. We would be happy to do that.
Okay.
Okay?
This is a great.
Be happy to. I've been working specifically, intimately with the community all over the city of Columbus as a liaison officer for many different precincts, not just one. I'm be happy, glad to meet with you after, and I will just start jotting down the notes. So let's do that because we have to get through this, the rest of his agenda here in just a few minutes. So, okay?
Absolutely, and we're happy. Right.
Okay. Well, you haven't reached out to Chris Reilly, and that's me.
Yep.
So I'm Chris Reilly. You will know me. You will have my number.
Okay.
Okay?
So I think, part of what's critical as we look at safety and security, and we look at who may or may not be perpetrating different things. There's no one profile, right? There is no one type of house. There is no one type of victim. And I think that's a big part of something that we want to acknowledge across the city. Not all of Linden is dangerous. Not all of the Hilltop is dangerous. And that's why you see the city really trying to dig into data, dig into just that one-on-one contact, right? With GVI and the work they're doing at the grassroots level, with Care Coalition, really taking time. Violence doesn't happen out of nowhere, right? What we're seeing when we see crimes being committed, they're not committing out of nowhere. There's, someone's not living an amazing life, and then all of a sudden tomorrow they're like, I'm gonna go do something violent today, right? Like that's not how things work. And I think at times it can be so frustrating. At times it can be so upsetting. Why did this happen? What is going on? Why are we seeing this in our neighborhood? You're angry and you're frustrated and you want it to stop. But part of what we're doing and getting back to that comprehensive neighborhood safety, I always do this, right? The comprehensive neighborhood safety strategy is really taking that step back and saying, what's at the root of this? What's at the root of violence? What is driving this? Why is this happening? I think when we do that as a city, we get further. And as we were seeing in the numbers, we were seeing numbers go down. 2020 was beautiful when it started, and then COVID, like the rest of the planet. So I wanted to plug that in as we move forward. The mayor and others have acknowledged very widely we can't police our way out of it. We have to essentially community our way out of it, and that's what we're trying to accomplish.
Great, thanks for that. And as we start to close, we have one final question for our entire panel, and Lori, if you don't mind, we'll start down with you. If all of you could tell us if you could leave one thing with our viewers viewing virtually and with us here in person, if you could leave one thing with them regarding safety, whether that be ways to get involved, if that would be organizations within their communities that they could help with, if there are ways to participate in your particular program, if you could leave the residents watching and here in person with one thing, safety, what would that be? And that's a question for the entire panel, but Lori, we'll start with you.
I'll say this, in the interest of time and certainly respecting Emerald's space in this area and the knowledge around the city offerings. I come from the county side, so I'm not nearly as familiar. I guess I'll just leave this evening with just a statement, and I think this encompasses a lot of what we're talking about. Addressing urban violence is ultimately not about eliminating death and sorrow. It is about preserving life and joy. And so when you bring community together and empower the community to assist in solving this problem and coming at it from an approach of preserving life versus it's so desolate, it's so awful, the goal is about preserving life and joy, not eliminating death and sorrow. You get it, right? Violence, but we really need to focus on preserving that life and joy, and by way of doing that is pulling the community together and empowering the community to help resolve these issues.
Yeah, violence begets violence, right? Peace begets peace. So for me, on behalf of the Department of Neighborhoods, please get involved in your area commission. I know there are seats open right now on both Linden area commissions, so please get involved. When you're an area commissioner, you hear things first, and you know, we work through you directly on building and zoning issues and all kinds of issues, right? You are those leaders in that neighborhood. And then also your block watches. Curtis and I attend once in a while, but many times in those block watches, which is headed up by our amazing CPD, that's a very frank conversation with neighbors and officers, right? This is what we're seeing, this is where we're seeing it. So it's not normally attended by a lot of city staff. It's a conversation with those neighbors who are part of the community, literally watching the community with their community liaison officer. So please be involved there. And then do not be shy to reach out to anyone in the city if you're seeing absolutely anything, right? 311 for anything non-emergency and non-urgent, 4545, if 614-645-4545, right? The non-emergency line, so something that is urgent but not an emergency. And then good old-fashioned 911 if it is an emergency. So I will kick that over to Officer Reilly from there.
Okay, thank you. You know, I'm optimistic. You were just saying we were trending downward on a lot of our numbers pre-COVID. I'm optimistic because we see people coming out, and the important part is to find like-minded people. You don't have to come clear across town to find like-minded people. You can do that right, whether it's in Linden at the commission meeting or at the neighborhood watch meeting, or no, you say you don't want to be part of anything, but you want to be with other like-minded people to get something done. As a police officer, I can only say that working with these other folks for so many years, you know, some of the best ways to support efforts in your community is to work with the police. Even if you don't like the police, I say you don't like them, you're fine. But you want to work with your community, make your community better, that's great. And then you will see how great that so many of our police officers have had and the great work that they do day in and day out. These are amazing men and women that come when other people are running away. So I just want to say that you're going to be so surprised, I think, if you work with other folks like yourself here, maybe, you know, at the end of next year, because we have had using this as an opportunity to make things better at the city level. You do it at a neighborhood level, and then when this is all over, things are already in the motion and connecting post-COVID. And you're going to say that's when we got things done, and that's when we made an investment.
All right, great. Thank you for that. So we hope that you have learned some valuable information tonight, and we hope that with the information that we've shared, you will be able to reach out to us at the city and our various departments, and please get involved with the safety programs that we have. Landlords, also with Officer Reilly and the Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design program. Please ask him more information about that. Contact any of our departments to learn more about that. So as we wrap up our panel discussion portion, before we go to our special guest speaker, let's give a round of applause to Lori Francescan, Emerald Hernandez Pata, and Officer Christopher Reilly, and thank them for their knowledge this evening. So thank you so much. And now we'll move to our special guest who's joining us this evening, who is Robert Clark. Robert Clark was appointed Director of the Columbus Department of Public Safety on September 3rd of 2021. A native of Youngstown, Ohio, Director Clark is excited to return to his home state and take on this role at such a critical time. Clark believes his track record as a leader in innovative and service-oriented policing will help him advance change, build community trust, and keep Columbus residents safe. Director Clark brings 35 years of local, federal, and international law enforcement experience. These years include his assignment to Vice and Narcotics with the Youngstown Police Department, collaborating with ATF and the FBI, and working for the U.S. Department of Justice. Most recently, Clark was the Senior Superintendent for the Trinidad and Tobago Police Department, where he oversaw intelligence efforts and helped build an infrastructure to upgrade policies and strategies for combating violence, crime, and improving community relations. He is a great stand-up guy. I've had the opportunity to meet him a couple of times before, and we are happy to have him here this evening. So please join me in welcoming our award-winning Public Safety Director, Mr. Robert Clark.
Well, thank you, everyone, and thank you for being here, and thank you for continuing to tune in online. I certainly appreciate that. Let me say this first. We have talked about a lot of things that are wrong, and we do recognize that there are a lot of things wrong. But let me also remind you that there are a lot of things right. As Officer Reilly mentioned, we have very dedicated women and men who go to work every day, every watch, and do the work that we have asked them to do. And most oftentimes in very, very, very critical situations without a lot of trust and engagement from the community, and they still come to work every day and do the very difficult work that we ask them to do. And not just in the Division of Police, but across public safety, our Division of Fire, our EMS. As I had the opportunity just this week to interview someone for our 911 manager position, I explained that the 911 call takers are the inception point by which we begin servicing the community and how critical those positions are. So all of the women and men across public safety who are serving every single day and don't receive a lot of thank you, but we don't really join this work for the thank yous. We join this work and do this work because we want to be a part of difference making. And I assure you that there are women and men out there right now as we meet and we speak who are doing just that. They are making difference in people's lives. With that said, let me acknowledge that there are things that are wrong. There are things that we need to do better. I watch the stats every day in the city. I get the alerts all day long, all night long of things that are happening around the city. And I acknowledge everything that you shared at the microphone, that we have problems that we need to address in our city. Most specifically and most importantly, the crime and violence that's happening in our city. We recognize in 2021, and based on my 35 years of experience literally around the United States, where I was assigned in Youngstown, as you heard, with the FBI in Chicago, Washington, D.C., Los Angeles, California, spent time in Central America, spent time in the Caribbean. I have seen crime and violence, and I'm here to tell you, we will never arrest our way out of what's happening in our community, whether it's Linden, Hilltop, or wherever it exists, not just in Columbus, but across the United States. We are poised at a position in history. Let me say that again. We are poised at a position in history where you have dynamic leadership in the Division of Police. Chief Elaine Bryant, Assistant Chief LaShawna Potts, they are dynamic leaders with some dynamic ideas, and most importantly, with dynamic experience that they brought with them here from the city of Detroit. As I shared with you, I spent 12 years in Los Angeles, California, where I was in charge of gangs and violent crime and a whole bunch of other things. And I'm here to share with you that when I left there in 2019, guess what was still there? Gangs. We did not arrest our way out of it. Although I had tremendous success in Los Angeles, I recognized early on the value of innovative partnerships, innovative approaches, innovative conversations, where it just wasn't about how many handcuffs we could buy, how many search warrants we could do, how many doors we could tear off. That was not what the conversation was about. What it was really about is how can we solidify the cornerstone of policing, and that is to serve and protect. Secondly, how can we create opportunities for organizations to align themselves with our policing concepts and bring what I coined health, healing, and restoration to our communities? How can we reach our youth? How can we begin to have a very different conversation with those in our community, such as yourselves, who are here this evening and care about your community? How can we create a very different conversation with you to figure out how we can partner together to solve some of the problems. Now, you've heard about some strategies at the table today: GVI, group violence intervention, neighborhood safety strategies. What you didn't hear is that we are looking for partners. We are looking for you, our community, our residents, to partner with us in these strategies and initiatives so that we can begin to have some impact in our communities. Because as I said, we will not arrest our way out of this problem. When I was in Los Angeles, we recognized that. And myself, along with members from the Los Angeles Police Department and a variety of other organizations, over 180 different organizations in Los Angeles, we created the Community Impact Program. And while we were doing our law enforcing, we were committed to going back to those communities and bringing health, healing, and restoration. And we know it works. I know it works. One of the communities, and you can look this up, one of the communities that we did exactly what we've been talking about here this evening, GVI, neighborhood safety strategies. One of the neighborhoods is Lower Baldwin Village on the south side of Los Angeles. If you look it up, you may know it as the Jungle. You may really know it because it was the neighborhood that Denzel Washington filmed Training Day in. That is a real neighborhood. Those were real gang members in that movie. And why and how did we change the dynamic of relationships and crime and violence and the quality of life in that community? Simply because we had partnerships. Because we went to those communities, we cleaned up the trash, we painted over the graffiti, we fixed the sidewalks, we fixed the playgrounds, we returned the community centers to the community. And we were able to turn crime around and lower crime in that specific area. And again, it took a lot of work from the police, from nonprofit organizations, from faith-based organizations, a lot of innovative programming, but we did it. And what we accomplished in that community is that we not only reduced crime and violence, but we improved the quality of life. There were businesses that came to that community. There are now cafe shops and sandwich shops and condos, and if you didn't know that it was the Jungle back in the day, you would not know that today, because that community looks very different today. Because we did something innovative. We did something different. But we can't do that alone. You heard Officer Reilly talk about all the things that he does. Having been a police officer, I know we need relationships. We need partnerships. And yes, there are things that we in the Division of Police need to do differently. We recognize that. The chief recognizes that. The assistant chief is working very hard. They are working very hard every day to begin to change two very important things, not just in the Division of Police, but in the city of Columbus, and that's climate and culture. It's about how we communicate with each other, how we're connected to one another, how we are present at these meetings and are willing to have the hard conversations. As I just said last night as I was at another meeting, I'm very clear on what the Department of Public Safety is going to do. I just described all of that to you. But what I'm also going to do is ask you and ask all of the residents in the city of Columbus, those listening, those with us, those not with us, what are you willing to do with us? Not just sit on the sidelines and complain, but I need players who want to get in the game, because none of us can do everything, and we are much stronger together. You've heard the saying, and if you haven't, I'm going to share it with you now. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And that's what I'm proposing to do. As the new public safety director, I am committed to working with the chief of police, the fire chief, and all of the women and men in public safety to figure out what can we do differently. What can I do from my office and my desk to support Officer Reilly and his colleagues? What can I do to partner with the ladies who are present at the table today so that we begin to make a difference? But before we make that difference, we have to change the dialogue. And what I mean by that is we acknowledge that things have been done wrong in the past, or we didn't meet the goals that we wanted in the past. But this is not a rearview mirror conversation. This is a windshield conversation. What's before us? What are we going to do differently tomorrow? We've got to look at it from that perspective. We acknowledge that some things have happened in the past, and we are working very hard. The chief is working very hard to change that dialogue, change those engagements, change that perspective, change deployments, change strategies. And part of our strategy, as you've already heard tonight, is to look for innovative partnerships and strategies that we can develop in our communities with our kids, so that ultimately we can change their perspective. One of the things, again, I shared last night, a young man was in the room and he said, you know, our kids don't want to talk to the police. They don't want the police talking to us. And I asked him, change your language. We don't want to talk to you either. We want to speak with you. That's a very different mindset. We want to speak with you, which means we are creating a bilateral conversation. I'm listening to you and you're listening to me, and at some point we are going to come to a resolution for what it is that we can do together. I'm here to tell you, as the new Director of Public Safety, we will not do it alone. No matter how much money we get or money we don't get, no matter how many police officers we hire or don't hire, my philosophy is the presence of money does not guarantee success. The absence of money does not guarantee failure, but it's about how we are strategizing, how we are prioritizing. But we need your voice. We need your passion. We need your energy. We need your concern. We need you to help us change the dialogue in your own communities, in your own homes, with our kids, with our youth, with businesses. We need your help to change the conversation. And when you invite us to the conversation and create a space and a place for myself, for the chief, the assistant chief, the men and women of the Division of Police, the men and women of the Division of Fire, we promise to show up and change the conversation with you. We are already doing program, the REACT program, that I'll be meeting with in a couple of weeks, who go out and they're talking to addicts. Did you get what you need? Do you need resources? Do you need rehab? How can we help you to get into programming? So we are already trying to change the dialogue. We have just not had the opportunity to be in these spaces and places to actually share with you what we are doing. That's why I started this conversation reminding all of us that we have women and men out there right now on mid-watch, and will be there tonight and there tomorrow morning, who are making a difference. And they are human beings just like you and I. They have bills and concerns, and kids that don't listen, and college kids that don't visit, and high school kids that think they know everything. They have the same issues and concerns we do, but they still show up and do the job we ask them to do. Now, do we have challenging days ahead of us? Absolutely. Will we have to step back, remeasure, retool, redo some things? Of course we will. But at least we will be in a process of making progress, not just standing on the sidelines and complaining about everything that's wrong. I'm inviting you to the field with us. Those who are present, those who are online, those who may hear this later on a recording, I'm inviting you to the process. We promise to create a space for you because we recognize that we will never be able to hire enough police officers. That's not part of the conversation. We need more, and we're certainly doing that. But it's not about hiring more police officers. It's about understanding the impact of the neighborhood safety strategy. Who are our partners in that strategy? It's about deploying the GVI program and having direct impact in communities and bringing those who are involved in violence to that conversation, de-escalation, mediation, alternatives. That's where the resolution that you seek will be in programs like this and others that I've mentioned. So I just want to share with you one more time that we will never be able to arrest our way out of this problem. We recognize that. But as I said earlier, this is a historic moment to do something different. You have new, innovative, passionate, as you can see in the way I'm speaking to you, and the chief would too, and the assistant chief would too, very passionate leadership in the Department of Public Safety who are committed to doing what is right. But we need your help, and we will create a space and a place for you. and create that opportunity to have those hard conversations and find places for programs that you've heard about tonight and others that are being developed and how they are going to be deployed in not just your neighborhood or my neighborhood, but our neighborhood, because we are all Columbus. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you again, Director Clark. Process of progress. Before we end tonight, I wanted to let everyone know that those of you that are viewing us virtually, feel free to go to our website, which is columbushousing2021.com. On that website, you will find a link to a PDF file that is a sizable PDF file that has tons of information from organizations who have participated in our Landlord Education Series, as well as organizations who did not. But all of that information has to do with housing voucher programs, and even there's information about the CEPTED program and information from city agencies and organizations. So columbushousing2021.com, and you can go and get that information. We have one evening left of our education series for 2021, one evening which will happen on Thursday, November 4th, and that will take place at the Linden Community Center. And we will be there, and our theme for that night is Keeping Families at Home. And we will have a panel discussion around rental assistance programs, housing stabilization, as well as eviction prevention. So please join us on Thursday, November 4th at 6 o'clock at the Linden Community Center. Again, there are still spaces available if you would like to view virtually or attend in person. And again, you can go to our website, columbushousing2021.com, to register. So I wanted to make sure to include that. And as we wrap up tonight, as I said before, I hope that you have gained some valuable information. You will be able to make some connections and hopefully be able to take part in these programs that you've heard about this evening. Again, thank you to our very great panel, and also thank you to Director Robert Clark from Department of Public Safety. Thank you all for joining us this evening, whether you're virtual or here in person, and we hope you've enjoyed the third evening of our Landlord Education Series, and we hope to see you next Thursday. Thanks, and have a great evening.